The Jackson family sits shocked in the terminal as Delta Airlines Flight 2367 begins boarding without them. Their first-class tickets now worthless pieces of paper. James Jackson clutches his phone, the viral video already at 500,000 views. A tall man in an expensive suit approaches. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and join our community where we shine a light on stories that need to be told. Now, let's get back to what happened to the Jackson family that day at Atlanta International Airport. The morning had started with such promise for the Jackson family. Darnell Jackson, 42, a successful engineering executive at a Fortune 500 company, had spent months planning this special trip. His wife Ava, 39, a respected pediatrician at Atlanta Children's Hospital, had rearranged her busy schedule to ensure she could attend. Their twins, Jordan and Jasmine, both 16 and top students in their high school's advanced placement program, buzzed with excitement about the journey. This wasn't just any vacation. Jordan had qualified for the National Science Competition in New York, representing his school with a groundbreaking project on renewable energy. The entire family had rallied around his achievement, and Darnell had decided to make it extra special by booking first-class tickets for everyone. "You've earned this, son," Darnell had said when revealing the surprise. "Your hard work deserves to be celebrated in style." For the Jackson family, this represented more than luxury travel. It was a milestone. Despite their professional success and comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle, they had always been careful with expenses, prioritizing education and savings. First-class travel had always seemed an unnecessary splurge. The morning of the flight, anticipation filled their elegant suburban home as they packed their final items. Jasmine helped her brother organize his presentation materials while their parents double-checked the itinerary. "Remember," Ava said while adjusting Jordan's tie, "this is a big moment for you. Try not to be nervous." "I'm more excited about flying first class than the competition," Jordan joked, though everyone knew how hard he'd worked on his project. Darnell smiled but felt that familiar knot in his stomach. Years of experience had taught him that even as a successful black professional, he needed to be extra prepared for public interactions. "Everyone has their ID and boarding passes," he asked for the third time. "And remember, we need to arrive extra early." Ava caught his eye, understanding the unspoken concern. "Everything's in order, honey. It'll be fine." They arrived at Atlanta International Airport 3 hours before departure, their luggage neatly packed and their attire impeccable. Darnell wore a tailored navy suit, Ava a professional pantsuit, and the twins wore business casual attire that made them look older than their 16 years. The first hint of trouble came during check-in. Despite approaching the premium lane clearly marked for first-class passengers, the attendant eyed them with visible surprise. "First class," she repeated when Darnell presented their tickets, her tone suggesting she might have misheard. "Yes, 4 tickets to New York, first class," Darnell confirmed pleasantly, maintaining his professional smile despite the subtle slight. The attendant's fingers moved more slowly across her keyboard than they had for the white businessmen who checked in before them. She asked for their IDs twice, scrutinizing each one carefully. "Is there a problem?" Ava asked, her voice calm but firm. "No, no problem," the attendant replied quickly. "Just being thorough." As they moved toward security, Jasmine whispered to her mother, "Did you see how she looked at us? Like we didn't belong there." Ava squeezed her daughter's hand. "Some people still make assumptions. That's why your education is so important." The family had experienced these subtle microaggressions before. The surprised looks when Darnell mentioned his executive position. The questions about how Ava managed to become a doctor. The assumptions that their children must be athletes rather than scholars. At the security checkpoint, they were randomly selected for additional screening. Jordan's science project materials received extra scrutiny, despite being clearly labeled and documented. "This happens every time," Jordan muttered as a TSA agent examined his carefully prepared graphs and models. "Stay calm and polite," Darnell reminded him quietly. We know who we are. After clearing security, the family headed to the premium lounge, where Darnell had planned for them to relax before boarding. At the entrance, the lounge attendant glanced at their boarding passes with raised eyebrows. Let me just verify these, she said, picking up a phone while the Jackson family waited. A white couple behind them was waved through without hesitation. Darnell exchanged glances with Ava. They both recognized the treatment but remained composed for their children's sake. After verification, they were admitted to the lounge, where they tried to enjoy the amenities despite feeling the stares of other passengers. Why do people keep looking at us? Jasmine asked, uncomfortable with the attention. Sometimes people aren't used to seeing black families in certain spaces, Ava explained gently. But we have every right to be here. Darnell checked his watch and gathered their belongings. Let's head to the gate. I always prefer to be early for boarding. None of them could have predicted the humiliation that awaited them. The Jackson family arrived at Gate A23 30 minutes before boarding was scheduled to begin. The area was already filling with passengers for Delta Flight 2367 to New York. Darnell led his family to the priority seating area near the gate, where first-class passengers typically waited. A few heads turned as they took their seats. Darnell had grown accustomed to these looks throughout his professional career, the subtle surprise, the quick assessment, the assumptions made about his presence in premium spaces. He straightened his already immaculate tie, a habit formed years ago when he realized that being impeccably dressed sometimes, but not always, reduced the frequency of these incidents. When boarding time approached, the family gathered their belongings and moved toward the priority line. The gate agent, a woman whose name tag identified her as Gloria Reynolds, looked up as they approached. Her smile faltered momentarily. Good morning, Darnell said, presenting their boarding passes. We're in first class. Gloria took the boarding passes, her eyes flicking between the documents and the family with poorly concealed surprise. Are you sure you're at the right gate? She asked, despite the clearly marked destination and flight number on their passes. Yes, Flight 2367 to New York, Ava confirmed. First class, seats 2A through 2D. Gloria studied the boarding passes again. Just one moment, please. She picked up a phone and turned away slightly. I need to verify something with my supervisor. Behind them in line, a white businessman approached with his first-class ticket. Gloria paused her call long enough to scan his boarding pass and wave him through without question. Two more white passengers in business attire received the same efficient treatment while the Jackson family continued waiting. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably beside her mother. Why is she calling someone? Our tickets are right there. It's okay, honey, Ava whispered, though her back had stiffened. Just a mix-up, I'm sure. Jordan stood silently, watching as more first-class passengers were processed while they remained at the counter. His father's carefully neutral expression was one he recognized. The face Darnell wore when navigating situations where expressing frustration would only make things worse. 5 minutes passed before a man in a Delta uniform approached from behind the counter. His name tag read, Richard Blackwell, Gate Supervisor. His expression was already set in what appeared to be annoyed determination before he even reached them. Is there a problem here? He asked, addressing Gloria rather than the Jackson family. These passengers have first-class boarding passes, Gloria explained, but there seems to be some kind of irregularity with their reservation. Blackwell turned to them with a professionally detached expression. Good morning. I understand there's some confusion with your tickets. There's no confusion on our end, Darnell replied calmly. We booked first-class tickets months ago for this flight. The boarding passes clearly show our seat assignments. Blackwell took the boarding passes, examining them with exaggerated scrutiny. By now, other passengers in line were watching the interaction, some with curiosity, others with impatience. Yes, well, sometimes the system makes mistakes, Blackwell said. It appears you may have been upgraded incorrectly. We weren't upgraded, Ava interjected firmly. We purchased first-class tickets directly from your website. I have the confirmation emails and credit card statements to prove it. Blackwell's expression tightened. Ma'am, there's no need to get upset. I'm just trying to sort this out. No one is upset, Darnell said evenly. We're simply clarifying that these are not upgraded tickets. We paid full price for first class. The gate supervisor glanced around, noticing the growing attention from other passengers. Perhaps we should discuss this away from the gate. We don't want to create a scene. Jordan, sensing the familiar pattern of their concerns being dismissed, discreetly removed his phone from his pocket and began recording. As a black teenager, his parents had taught him the importance of documentation when facing potential discrimination. There's no scene to create, Darnell responded. We have valid tickets and would like to board with the other first-class passengers. A flight attendant who had been standing near the jet bridge approached. Her name tag read, Melissa Clark. Is everything all right here, Richard? She asked, her eyes surveying the Jackson family with obvious skepticism. These passengers have some ticketing issues we're trying to resolve, Blackwell explained. We don't have ticketing issues, Ava corrected firmly. We have valid first-class tickets that your staff is refusing to honor. Clark leaned closer to Blackwell and spoke in a voice that was meant to be discreet but was still audible to the family. First class is almost full with our regular passengers. Perhaps they would be more comfortable in economy anyway. The implication hung in the air. Darnell felt a familiar burn in his chest, the unique pain of having his belonging in a space questioned because of his race. He had worked too hard and accomplished too much to let this pass. Excuse me, he said, his voice measured but clear. Are you suggesting we should be moved from the first-class seats we paid for because we don't fit your image of regular passengers? Is it because we're black? A tense silence followed his question. Several nearby passengers looked away uncomfortably. Others watched with increased interest. Blackwell and Clark exchanged glances. Sir, Blackwell said, his tone now decidedly colder, nobody mentioned race. If you're going to make accusations, perhaps we should involve security. The word, security, hung in the air like a threat. Darnell felt Ava tense beside him, and he instinctively moved slightly in front of his children. Throughout his life, he had witnessed how quickly situations involving black people and security could escalate, regardless of who was actually at fault. I don't see why security would be necessary, Darnell responded carefully. We're simply trying to board our flight with the tickets we purchased. Blackwell held the boarding passes in his hand, not returning them to the family. There appears to be a ticketing irregularity that we need to address before you can board. What specific irregularity? Ava pressed, her professional demeanor as a physician evident in her direct questioning. Our tickets clearly show first-class seats that we paid for months ago. Sometimes passengers are accidentally upgraded in the system, Blackwell replied vaguely. That's not what happened, Darnell insisted, pulling out his phone. I have the original confirmation email showing that we purchased and paid for first-class tickets on March 3, nearly 3 months ago. He displayed the email, which clearly showed first class and the total amount paid, over $5,200 for the 4 round-trip tickets. Blackwell barely glanced at it. Sir, computer errors happen all the time, he said dismissively. That doesn't explain why other passengers with first-class tickets are boarding without any issues, Jordan pointed out, his phone still discreetly recording the encounter. Melissa Clark stepped forward, placing herself between the family and the boarding gate. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding when you booked. Many passengers don't realize the difference between economy comfort and actual first class. Ava's eyes narrowed. We understand the difference perfectly. We paid for first class, our boarding passes say first class, and our seat assignments are in the first class cabin. 2A through 2D. Those seats are reserved for our premium customers, Clark said, the implication clear in her tone. We are premium customers, Darnell responded firmly. We paid the premium price. By now, the regular boarding process had stalled. The line of waiting passengers had grown, with many watching the confrontation with interest. From the corner of his eye, Darnell noticed a white man in a business suit step out of line and approach. "Excuse me," the man said, addressing Blackwell. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm also in first class, and I don't understand the problem. If they have first-class tickets, why aren't they being allowed to board?" Blackwell's demeanor changed instantly. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. We're handling a private matter with these passengers." "It seems pretty public to me," the man persisted. "And it seems like they're being treated differently than the other first-class passengers. I've been watching." "Sir, please return to your place in line," Clark instructed firmly. "Mr. Thomas Anderson, is it?" she added, glancing at his boarding pass. "Your boarding group will be called shortly." Anderson looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. "I'll wait until this family is allowed to board with their valid tickets." Blackwell's expression hardened. He turned to Gloria at the counter and whispered something. She immediately picked up the phone again. Less than 2 minutes later, 2 security officers appeared at the gate. "This is completely unnecessary," Ava protested as the officers approached. "These passengers are disrupting the boarding process," Blackwell informed the security officers, completely misrepresenting the situation. "They're insisting on boarding in first class with economy tickets." "That's not true," Jasmine exclaimed, speaking up for the first time, her voice trembling with emotion. "We have first-class tickets." One of the security officers, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut, positioned himself directly in front of Darnell. "Sir, I'm going to need you and your family to step aside." "Our tickets are first class," Darnell repeated, struggling to maintain his composure. "This is discrimination, plain and simple." The second security officer, a shorter woman with a severe expression, spoke into her radio. "We may need additional assistance at gate A23. An announcement came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay in boarding flight 2367 to New York. We're experiencing a passenger situation that needs to be resolved. We'll begin boarding shortly." The eyes of everyone in the gate area were now on the Jackson family. Some passengers looked annoyed at the delay. Others seemed uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. A few had their phones out, apparently recording. "You need to move away from the gate now," the male security officer insisted. "Or you risk being banned from flying today altogether." Ava stepped forward, her hands visibly shaking but her voice steady. "I'm Dr. Ava Jackson. We purchased first-class tickets for this flight to attend our son's national science competition. We have done nothing wrong. Your staff is refusing to honor our tickets without any valid explanation, and now you're threatening us with security. The only difference between us and the other passengers you've allowed to board is the color of our skin." Her words hung in the air. Several passengers nodded in agreement. Thomas Anderson spoke up again. "I'll vouch for them. This is clearly discriminatory treatment." Clark turned to Anderson. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. Please board the aircraft or risk losing your seat as well." Jordan's phone continued recording as Clark turned to another flight attendant and whispered, not realizing her voice was being captured, "These people clearly don't belong in first class. I don't know how they got those tickets." The comment was clearly audible to the Jackson family. Jasmine's eyes filled with tears of humiliation and anger. For a 16-year-old girl who had never been anything but a model student, the public suggestion that she didn't belong in a space her family had paid to occupy was devastating. "That's enough," Darnell said, his patience finally breaking. "We will not be treated this way. We demand to speak with your manager immediately." "Sir, step back from the gate or we will escort you from the terminal," the female security officer threatened, her hand moving to her belt. Faced with the threat of escalation that could potentially lead to much worse outcomes, Darnell made the heartbreaking decision that many black parents have had to make, prioritizing his family's safety over justice in the moment. "Fine," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We'll step aside. As they moved away from the gate, Blackwell called after them. "We can accommodate you in economy, as a courtesy. Though after this disruption, you should be grateful we're allowing you to fly at all." It was the final insult, being offered economy seats as a courtesy after paying full price for first class, and being told they should be grateful for this treatment. As the Jackson family moved away from the gate, the boarding process resumed. They watched in disbelief as passengers filed onto the plane that should have carried them to New York for Jordan's competition. The Jackson family sat in a row of uncomfortable seats in the terminal, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. Jasmine wiped tears from her cheeks, trying to hide her face from curious onlookers. Jordan sat rigidly beside her, his phone still in his hand, the recording stopped but saved. Ava stared straight ahead, her professional composure cracking under the weight of the public humiliation they just endured. Darnell felt a complex storm of emotions, rage at the injustice, shame at being unable to protect his family from this experience, and the bitter familiarity of having to swallow discrimination to avoid more dangerous outcomes. "I can't believe this is happening," Jasmine whispered. "Everyone was watching us like we did something wrong." "We didn't do anything wrong," Darnell reassured her, though the words felt hollow in the face of what had just transpired. Around them, the airport continued its normal rhythms. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Passengers rushed to gates. But for the Jackson family, time seemed suspended in this moment of injustice. Through the large windows, they could see their flight, the one they should have been on, still at the gate. The first-class passengers, visible through the windows, were being served pre-departure beverages. The scene was a stark reminder of what had been wrongfully taken from them. "What about my competition?" Jordan asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. "It starts tomorrow morning." The science competition he had worked toward for months, the whole reason for this trip, now hung in the balance. Ava checked her watch, her physician's mind already calculating alternatives. "We'll find another flight," she promised, though the logistical challenges were daunting. Last-minute tickets would be expensive, possibly unavailable, and there was no guarantee they wouldn't face similar discrimination on another airline. "I got it all on video," Jordan said, holding up his phone. "Everything they said. Including when that flight attendant said we don't belong in first class." "Smart thinking," Darnell said, proud of his son's presence of mind despite the situation. "What good will it do?" Jasmine asked bitterly. "No one cares. This happens all the time to people who look like us, and nothing ever changes." Ava put her arm around her daughter. "That's not entirely true, sweetheart. Documentation matters. Evidence matters." "Your mother's right," Darnell agreed. "Without proof, it's our word against theirs, and too often, our word isn't enough." Jordan looked down at his phone, then back at his father. "So what do we do with the video?" Darnell considered the question carefully. Throughout his career, he had faced moments like this, incidents where he had to decide whether to speak up and risk retaliation or stay silent and preserve his position. But this was different. This involved his children, their dignity, and the lesson they would take from this experience. "We make it known," he decided. "We show the world what happened here today." As they discussed their next steps, they noticed their former gate had become unusually busy. Airport staff seemed to be rushing around. The white businessman who had spoken up for them, Thomas Anderson, emerged from the jet bridge, apparently having deplaned. He scanned the terminal and, spotting the Jackson family, walked directly toward them. "I'm so sorry about what happened," he said without preamble. "It was completely unacceptable. I told them as much." "Thank you for trying to help," Ava said sincerely. "I got off the flight," Anderson explained. "I couldn't sit there in good conscience after seeing how you were treated. I've already filed a formal complaint with customer service, for whatever that's worth." His gesture of solidarity, while meaningful, highlighted another painful reality: he had the privilege of choosing whether to be involved in their struggle, while they had no choice but to endure it. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and felt powerless to stop it? Comment number 1: if you believe more people should stand up like Thomas Anderson did when they see injustice happening. Or do you think most people prefer to stay comfortable and look the other way? Like this video if you've ever experienced similar treatment while traveling, and subscribe to join our community of people committed to exposing these stories. What do you think the Jackson family should do with the video evidence they collected? Should they make it public, or would that just expose them to more scrutiny and potential backlash? Let's continue with their story and find out what happens next. I think you should post it, Jasmine said, looking at her brother's phone. People need to see this. Jordan nodded, his expression resolute. He had already begun editing the video, trimming it to highlight the most egregious moments of discrimination they had faced. The clip clearly showed Clark's comment about them not belonging in first class, Blackwell's dismissal of their valid tickets, and the security officer's threatening approach despite their calm demeanor. Are you sure? Darnell asked, considering the potential consequences. As a corporate executive, he understood the power of social media, but also its unpredictability. Once it's out there, we can't take it back. I'm sure, Jordan said firmly. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone who gets treated this way and doesn't have the means to fight back. With his family's agreement, Jordan added a simple caption to the video, paid for first class on at Delta. Denied boarding because we don't look like we belong. #FlyingWhileBlack #discrimination. He pressed post, sending the video to his modest following on social media. None of them could have predicted what would happen next. Within minutes, Jordan's phone began buzzing with notifications. His video was being shared rapidly across multiple platforms. Comments poured in, some expressing outrage at their treatment, others sharing similar experiences, and a few predictable trolls attempting to justify the airline's actions. It's getting a lot of attention, Jordan said, scrolling through the rapidly multiplying comments. 5,000 views already. And climbing, Thomas Anderson noted, looking over Jordan's shoulder. This is going to blow up. While the video gained traction online, Darnell took practical action. He called Delta's customer service line, navigating through the automated system until he finally reached a human representative. I'd like to report a serious incident of discrimination that just occurred at Atlanta International Airport, he began, his voice controlled and professional despite his anger. The customer service representative sounded sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. I'm very sorry to hear about your experience, Mr. Jackson. I can certainly make a note in our system about this incident. A note in your system isn't sufficient, Darnell replied. My family was publicly humiliated and denied boarding with valid first-class tickets based on racial profiling. We need this addressed immediately by someone with the authority to take action. I understand your frustration, sir, but I'm not authorized to escalate matters of this nature. The best I can do is submit a formal complaint that will be reviewed within 7 to 10 business days. 7 to 10 business days? Darnell repeated incredulously. My son's national science competition starts tomorrow morning in New York. We need to be on a flight today. I can certainly check availability on later flights, the representative offered, missing the point entirely. After a frustrating and unproductive conversation, Darnell hung up. They're not going to help us, he told his family. Ava had already taken action of her own, texting her law school friend Warren Hayes, who now specialized in civil rights cases. His response was immediate. Document everything. Names, badge numbers, times. Don't sign anything or accept any compensation without talking to me first. I'll make some calls. Meanwhile, Jordan's phone continued to buzz incessantly. The video had reached 100,000 views and was spreading rapidly. News outlets had begun to reach out through his social media accounts, requesting interviews and permission to share the footage. This is crazy, Jasmine said, watching the view count climb. It's at 500,000 now. It's resonating with people because it happens all the time, Ava observed. The only difference is we caught it on video. The comments section of the video had become a forum for shared experiences. This happened to me last year on a different airline. No video, so nobody believed me. I'm a black executive who flies first class weekly and still get asked if I'm in the right line. Every single time. This is why I dress up in a full suit just to fly economy. And I still get profiled. As their story spread across the internet, the Jackson family found themselves at the center of a national conversation about racial profiling in the travel industry. What had begun as a personal humiliation was transforming into a movement. But viral attention came with its own challenges. Some commenters questioned their story or suggested they must have done something to provoke the airline staff. Others critiqued their decision to play the race card rather than recognizing the undeniable discrimination they had faced. Are we doing the right thing? Jasmine wondered, reading some of the negative comments. Some people are being really mean. Truth often comes with backlash, Darnell told her. But staying silent doesn't create change. Ava's phone rang, a New York number she didn't recognize. After a brief conversation, she turned to her family, her expression a mix of surprise and vindication. That was a producer from Good Morning America. They want us to share our story on tomorrow's broadcast. The family exchanged glances, realizing that their private humiliation had become a public referendum on how black consumers are treated in America. Jordan's video just hit 1 million views, Thomas announced, still scrolling through the feed. And the airline's social media accounts are being flooded with comments. Darnell checked his own phone and found emails from colleagues, friends, and even his company's PR department, all reaching out after seeing the video. The corporate executive in him recognized that Delta was facing a major public relations crisis. The father in him simply wanted justice for his family. What do we do now? Jordan asked, overwhelmed by the response to his video. We tell our truth, Darnell answered. Clearly and consistently. And we don't accept anything less than full accountability. As they debated their next steps, none of them noticed the private car that had pulled up on the tarmac outside, or the purposeful stride of the man who emerged from it, heading directly toward the terminal. The commotion near their gate caught the Jackson family's attention. Airport staff who had been dismissive minutes earlier were now rushing about with an air of barely contained panic. Security officers stood at attention. Something significant was happening. What's going on? Jasmine wondered, watching the sudden flurry of activity. Thomas Anderson, who had remained with the family in solidarity, pointed toward the jet bridge. Someone important just arrived. Look at how the staff is reacting. Through the large terminal windows, they could see a black luxury car parked on the tarmac, a rare sight since vehicles were typically restricted to designated areas. A tall man in an expertly tailored suit had emerged and was now being escorted into the terminal by airport security. Jordan squinted, trying to make out the man's face. Wait, isn't that Calvin Richardson? Darnell confirmed, recognizing the CEO of Delta Airlines from numerous business publications and news segments. Richardson was well known in corporate America, a rare black CEO of a major airline who had risen through the ranks over a 30-year career. His presence at the airport, especially rushing directly to this particular gate, could not be coincidental. They watched as Richardson spoke with the gate agents, his expression grave. Blackwell and Clark, who had been so dismissive of the Jackson family, now stood rigidly attentive, their faces drained of color. Richardson held up his phone, apparently showing them something on the screen. He's seen the video, Ava realized. It must have reached him already. After a brief but intense conversation with the gate staff, Richardson turned and scanned the terminal. His eyes locked with Darnell's across the crowded space. Without hesitation, he began walking directly toward the Jackson family, flanked by airport management. Mr. and Dr. Jackson. Richardson addressed them, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority. I'm Calvin Richardson, CEO of Delta Airlines. I believe we need to talk. The sudden appearance of the airline's chief executive created a surreal moment. Passengers throughout the terminal had begun to recognize what was happening, many capturing photos and videos of the encounter. "Mr. Richardson," Darnell responded, rising to meet the CEO. "This is unexpected. I was in Atlanta for a board meeting," Richardson explained. "When I saw your son's video circulating online, I recognized the flight number and realized I was only minutes away. I came immediately." He turned to include the entire family in his attention. "What happened to you today is completely unacceptable. I've reviewed the footage, both from your son's recording and our security cameras. There is no excuse for how you were treated." His directness was surprising. Corporate executives typically avoided admitting fault so explicitly, especially in potential discrimination cases where legal liability loomed large. "I appreciate you saying that," Darnell replied carefully. "But acknowledgement doesn't erase what my family experienced." "You're absolutely right," Richardson agreed. "Which is why I'm here in person rather than sending a representative. Would you be willing to speak privately? I've arranged for a conference room in the executive lounge." The family exchanged glances, silently conferring. "Mr. Anderson is welcome to join us," Richardson added, acknowledging Thomas's presence. "I understand he was a witness to the incident." After a moment's consideration, Darnell nodded. "We're willing to hear what you have to say." As they walked through the terminal, the contrast to their earlier treatment was stark. Where they had previously been treated with suspicion and disdain, they now received deferential treatment as they accompanied the CEO. The same security officers who had threatened them earlier now held doors open and cleared their path. The executive lounge was luxuriously appointed, a space typically reserved for airline partners and VIP guests. As they settled into the plush chairs around a polished conference table, Richardson didn't waste time with corporate pleasantries. "I want to begin with a personal and official apology," he stated, looking each family member in the eye. "The treatment you received today violated not only our company policies but basic human dignity. It was discriminatory, pure and simple, and for that, I am deeply sorry." His apology seemed genuine, but the Jackson family remained cautious. They had experienced too many empty corporate apologies in the past. "I appreciate the sentiment," Darnell responded. "But I have to ask, would you be here if my son hadn't captured this on video and if it hadn't gone viral?" Richardson didn't flinch at the direct question. "Honestly, I would like to think yes, but realistically, it might have taken longer for this to reach my desk through normal channels. The video accelerated the process, but doesn't change the fundamental wrong that occurred." He continued, "I've already taken immediate action. Both Mr. Blackwell and Ms. Clark have been removed from duty pending a full investigation. I've personally reviewed the security footage from the gate, which confirms everything in your son's video." "Removed from duty isn't fired," Ava noted. "Will there be actual consequences?" "There will be," Richardson assured her. "I've initiated a formal investigation through our HR department and our external ethics committee. Based on what I've already seen, I expect it will result in termination. Discrimination has no place in our company." Jordan spoke up, his voice steady despite his age. "This isn't just about those two employees. The gate agent, the security officers, they all treated us differently because we're black. This is a systemic problem." Richardson nodded soberly. "You're right. Two employees didn't create this situation on their own. There's a culture that allowed them to believe their actions were acceptable, and that's on leadership. Ultimately, that's on me." As if to underscore Jordan's point about systemic issues, Richardson's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at it briefly, his expression darkening. "I've just received some preliminary findings from our IT department," he explained. "They've found internal communications between certain staff members expressing concern about your family being in first class. The language used," he paused, visibly disturbed, "was explicitly racial and completely reprehensible." The revelation wasn't surprising to the Jackson family, they had lived the experience, after all, but having it confirmed through internal documents validated their perception of events. "So it wasn't just poor customer service or a misunderstanding," Jasmine said quietly. They really didn't want us there because we're black. Yes, Richardson acknowledged, not sugarcoating the truth. And that's unacceptable in any context, but especially in a company that serves a diverse global customer base. Thomas Anderson, who had remained respectfully quiet during much of the exchange, finally spoke up. I witnessed everything from the beginning. As a white frequent flyer, I've never experienced anything remotely similar. The contrast in treatment was obvious and deliberate. When I tried to speak up, I was dismissed, but at least I wasn't threatened with security. Richardson turned to him. Thank you for trying to intervene, Mr. Anderson. Your witness account has been noted in our investigation. The CEO then refocused on the Jackson family. I know no apology or compensation can truly make this right. But I want you to know that I am personally committed to addressing this, both for your family specifically and systemically within our company. What exactly does that mean in practical terms? Darnell asked. It means immediate action, Richardson replied. First, we'll ensure you reach New York today for Jordan's competition. My personal aircraft is being prepared as we speak. Second, comprehensive compensation for the distress and humiliation you experienced. Third, systemic changes in our training and accountability measures to prevent this from happening to other families. The offer of his personal aircraft was unexpected, a gesture that went beyond typical corporate damage control. Yet the Jackson family remained cautious. They had experienced too many hollow promises of systemic change throughout their lives. How can we trust that real change will happen once the media attention dies down? Ava asked pointedly. It was the question at the heart of so many corporate diversity failures, initial promises followed by gradual return to the status quo once public scrutiny faded. Richardson's response surprised them. Because I'm going to ask for your help to ensure it doesn't. Mr. Jackson, with your corporate leadership experience, I'd like to invite you to join a newly formed Executive Diversity Advisory Board with actual oversight authority. Not as a token member, but as a leader who can hold us accountable. The offer was substantial, not merely compensation but a structural role in creating lasting change. Darnell considered it carefully, aware of both the opportunity and the potential pitfalls of such a position. Before he could respond, the conference room door opened, and the two security officers who had threatened the family earlier entered. Their demeanor had completely changed, gone was the aggressive posturing, replaced by evident discomfort. You requested to see us, sir, one asked Richardson, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the Jackson family. Yes, the CEO confirmed. I believe you owe this family an apology. As the security officers delivered their awkward apologies, the contrast between their current demeanor and their earlier threatening behavior was stark. Where they had been intimidating and dismissive at the gate, they now struggled to maintain eye contact with the family they had wronged. We were just following protocol based on the information provided by the gate staff, the female officer explained weakly. That's not good enough, Richardson interrupted firmly. Part of your job is to assess situations independently, not automatically assume black passengers are in the wrong when white staff make accusations. The officers shifted uncomfortably under his direct criticism. We'll be reviewing security protocols as part of our broader investigation, Richardson continued. You're dismissed for now, but expect to participate in the formal review process. After they left, Richardson turned back to the Jackson family. I've requested access to all CCTV footage from the terminal and gate areas. Our legal team is already reviewing it alongside your son's video. A knock at the door preceded the arrival of a Delta executive carrying a tablet. The preliminary findings you requested, sir, she said, handing the device to Richardson. He reviewed the information, his expression growing increasingly troubled. This confirms what I suspected, he said after a moment. The discrimination you experienced wasn't an isolated incident. He turned the tablet toward the family, showing them internal communications between staff members. The messages were damning, explicit discussions about the Jackson family that questioned how they could afford first-class tickets and suggested they should be carefully watched while on board. These communications violate multiple company policies, Richardson explained. And potentially federal anti-discrimination laws as well. This is exactly what we've been trying to explain, Ava said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. The assumptions made about us based solely on our race. Richardson nodded grimly. The evidence is unambiguous. Which brings me to an important question: how would you like to proceed? As CEO, I'm prepared to take decisive action internally, but you would be well within your rights to pursue legal remedies as well. It was a remarkable admission from a corporate leader, acknowledging not just wrongdoing but potential legal liability. Most companies would have their legal teams working to minimize exposure rather than openly discussing options with affected customers. Our primary concern right now is getting Jordan to his competition, Darnell replied. But we also want assurance that this won't happen to other families in the future. Understood on both counts, Richardson said. My assistant has already coordinated transportation to get you to New York today. As for systemic changes. He hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something, then continued, I'd like to be transparent about something that disturbs me deeply. Our data analysis team has identified a pattern of similar complaints from Black passengers over the past 18 months. They were handled through standard customer service channels and never escalated appropriately. The admission hung in the air, confirmation that their experience was part of a larger pattern rather than an isolated incident. That's both infuriating and sadly unsurprising, Darnell responded after a moment. A knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas Anderson excused himself to answer it, returning with an airport official and another passenger, a middle-aged white woman in business attire. This is Patricia Reynolds, Thomas explained. She was seated near us at the gate and witnessed everything. She'd like to provide her account for the investigation. Patricia stepped forward confidently. What happened to this family was appalling. I've been flying first class with Delta for 15 years, and I've never been questioned or asked to verify my tickets the way they were. The discrimination was obvious to everyone watching. Her voluntary testimony added another layer of validation to the Jackson family's experience. As a white, affluent passenger with no connection to the family, her perspective carried particular weight in confirming the discriminatory treatment. Thank you, Ms. Reynolds, Richardson said sincerely. Your willingness to come forward is greatly appreciated. If you're comfortable doing so, I'd like to include your statement in our formal investigation. Over the next hour, the investigation expanded rapidly. Additional witnesses came forward. More internal communications were uncovered. Security footage from multiple angles was reviewed, clearly showing the disparate treatment between the Jackson family and white passengers with similar tickets. The evidence is overwhelming, Richardson acknowledged after reviewing the materials. This was textbook racial profiling, enabled by inadequate oversight and training. For the Jackson family, the validation was important but bittersweet. No investigation could erase the humiliation they had experienced or the painful conversation they would need to have with their children about navigating a world where their achievements and status still didn't protect them from discrimination. Jordan, who had remained relatively quiet throughout the investigation, finally spoke up. I'm glad there's proof beyond my video. I was worried people wouldn't believe us without it. His comment highlighted the additional burden placed on victims of discrimination, the presumption that their lived experiences required extraordinary evidence to be believed. Your video was crucial, Richardson acknowledged. But what disturbs me most is thinking about how many similar incidents have occurred without documentation. How many passengers have suffered this treatment without the means to prove it or the platform to be heard? It was a rare moment of genuine reflection from a corporate leader, an acknowledgement of the broader social context in which this incident existed. As the investigation progressed, Richardson made a decision. I believe we have enough information to take immediate action, he announced. I'll be personally calling an emergency board meeting this evening to address both this specific incident and our systemic failures. He turned to Darnell. The offer to join our Executive Diversity Advisory Board stands. We need leaders who understand these issues firsthand and won't allow cosmetic changes to substitute for real reform. Darnell considered the offer carefully. On one hand, it represented an opportunity to create meaningful change from within a major corporation. On the other, he was wary of becoming a token figure in a public relations exercise. "I'll consider it," he replied. "But any involvement would require genuine authority and transparency." "Agreed," Richardson said without hesitation. "I'm prepared to put that in writing, with specific metrics and accountability measures." As the investigation concluded its initial phase, the path forward began to take shape. The Jackson family would proceed to New York for Jordan's competition. The employees involved would face appropriate consequences. And perhaps most importantly, structural changes would be implemented to address the environment that had allowed such discrimination to occur. But for Jasmine and Jordan, the scars of the experience would remain. No corporate response, however comprehensive, could fully erase the message they had received about their place in society, that even with all their family's success and resources, they could still be treated as if they didn't belong. "Are you okay?" Ava asked her children quietly as the executives conferred in the corner of the room. "I guess," Jasmine replied, her voice small. "I just keep thinking about how many people this happens to who don't get a CEO coming to help them." Her insight cut to the heart of the matter. The exceptional response their situation had received was itself a reflection of inequality. Most victims of discrimination never received such validation or resolution. As if reading their thoughts, Richardson approached the family again. "I want to be clear about something. The response you're receiving today should be the standard, not the exception. The fact that it took a viral video to prompt this level of accountability is itself a failure that we need to address." His candor was refreshing, but the reality remained that most instances of discrimination never received such attention or resolution. As the meeting concluded, Richardson made one final announcement. "I've decided that rather than handling this matter privately, we will be issuing a public statement acknowledging our failure and outlining specific steps for reform. Too often, these incidents are resolved behind closed doors with NDAs and settlements that prevent systemic change. That ends today." It was a bold move for a CEO, choosing transparency and accountability over the typical corporate strategy of minimizing exposure. Whether it represented a genuine commitment to change or a calculated response to a viral PR crisis remained to be seen. What was clear, however, was that the Jackson family's ordeal had created a moment of potential transformation, not just for one airline, but for an industry with a long history of discrimination. The sleek private jet touched down at LaGuardia Airport just after 6 p.m., less than 4 hours after the confrontation at Atlanta International. For the Jackson family, the luxurious accommodations of the CEO's personal aircraft stood in stark contrast to the humiliation they had endured earlier that day. "We're making our final approach to New York," the captain announced over the intercom. "Mr. Richardson has arranged for ground transportation to take you directly to your hotel." Jordan looked out the window at the New York skyline coming into view. "At least I'll make it to the competition tomorrow," he said, trying to focus on the positive outcome despite the trauma of the day. Darnell placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "And you're going to do brilliantly." As they prepared for landing, Darnell's phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was a draft of Delta's official statement, sent by Richardson for their review before public release. The language was strikingly direct. "Delta Airlines acknowledges and deeply regrets the discriminatory treatment experienced by the Jackson family at Atlanta International Airport today. Their experience reflected a failure not just of individual employees but of our systems and culture. We take full responsibility for this incident and are implementing immediate changes to ensure such discrimination never occurs again. The employees involved have been terminated, and we are conducting a comprehensive review of our training and protocols around customer treatment and implicit bias." The statement continued with specific commitments to policy changes, mandatory training programs, and the establishment of the Executive Diversity Advisory Board that Darnell had been invited to join. "They're not mincing words," Ava observed, reading over his shoulder. "That's unusual for a corporate statement." Richardson seems serious about taking responsibility, Darnell agreed. "Though the real test will be whether these changes are sustained after the media attention fades." As they disembarked in New York, they were greeted by Delta representatives who handled their luggage and escorted them to a waiting luxury SUV. The driver had already been briefed on their hotel destination and Jordan's competition venue for the following morning. "Dr. and Mr. Jackson," one representative said respectfully, "Mr. Richardson wanted me to inform you that all your expenses in New York will be covered by the airline, including accommodations, meals, and transportation. It's a small gesture compared to what you experienced today." The family settled into the vehicle, still processing the dramatic shift in their treatment. In the span of a few hours, they had gone from being treated as unwelcome intruders to receiving VIP service. "This is nice and all," Jasmine commented quietly as they drove through Manhattan, "but it doesn't fix what happened." "You're right," Ava agreed. "No amount of luxury treatment afterward can erase the humiliation of being discriminated against." Meanwhile, the situation had exploded on social media. Jordan's video had accumulated over 5 million views, spawning countless reaction videos, commentary, and sharing of similar experiences by other black travelers. Major news outlets had picked up the story, with several requesting interviews with the family. Darnell's phone rang, Warren Hayes, Ava's attorney friend, calling with an update. "I've reviewed Delta's official response and the compensation package they're offering," Warren said. "From a legal perspective, it's surprisingly comprehensive. The financial settlement is substantial, but more importantly, the structural changes they're committing to are significant. Richardson is putting his reputation on the line with these promises. Do you think they'll follow through?" Darnell asked. "The public scrutiny is so intense right now that they have to show meaningful progress," Warren replied. "And having you on their executive diversity board creates accountability they can't easily sidestep." After checking into their hotel, the family gathered in their suite to discuss next steps. The events of the day had left them exhausted but also presented them with decisions about how to proceed. "Several news programs want interviews," Ava noted, scrolling through the messages on her phone. "Good Morning America, CNN, MSNBC. Do we want to do that?" Jordan asked. "Keep talking about this publicly?" It was a complex question. On one hand, public attention was forcing accountability and could help prevent similar incidents for others. On the other, becoming the face of yet another viral racism story came with its own emotional toll. "I think we should be selective," Darnell suggested. "Choose platforms that will allow us to speak about the systemic issues rather than just the details of our specific experience." While they deliberated, Darnell received another call, this time from Richardson himself. "I wanted to update you personally," the CEO said. "The board has unanimously approved all the measures we discussed. Additionally, I've just come from a meeting with the executives of several other major airlines. They've agreed to form an industry task force on customer discrimination, using our new policies as a starting point." The ripple effects of their experience were expanding beyond a single airline to potentially transform practices across the industry. Later that evening, Darnell received an unexpected text message from Thomas Anderson, the white businessman who had stood up for them at the gate. "Just saw Delta's statement. Impressive response, but none of it would have happened without your family's courage in speaking up. I've been reflecting on how often I've witnessed similar situations and said nothing. That changes today. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to support you." His message represented another dimension of the impact, the awakening of bystanders to their role in either perpetuating or challenging discrimination. The following morning, Jordan arrived at the national science competition fully prepared despite the previous day's turmoil. His renewable energy project, which had earned him recognition at the state level, now stood among the most innovative entries in the national competition. As he set up his presentation, Darnell noticed a Delta Airlines representative speaking with the event organizers. Later, the competition director approached them. "Delta Airlines has just announced a new scholarship program for young scientists of color," she informed them. "They've named Jordan's project as the inaugural recipient. It includes a $50,000 college scholarship and mentorship opportunities with their engineering department." The announcement brought tears to Ava's eyes. They're putting real resources behind their words, she observed. Throughout the day, the family received updates about the ongoing response to their experience. The employees directly involved had indeed been terminated following the investigation. Delta had announced mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff, to be developed in consultation with civil rights organizations. And Richardson had scheduled meetings with the CEOs of other transportation companies to discuss industry-wide standards for preventing discrimination. That evening, the Jackson family gathered in their hotel room to watch Jordan receive an honorable mention in the national competition, a remarkable achievement considering the circumstances. "I'm proud of you," Darnell told his son. "Not just for this award, but for how you handled yourself yesterday. You documented what happened calmly and stood up for our family's dignity." As they celebrated Jordan's achievement, Darnell received an email notification. Delta's formal offer for him to join their Executive Diversity Advisory Board had arrived, complete with the authority and transparency measures he had requested. After reviewing the details, he turned to his family. "What do you think? Should I accept this position? Will it actually make a difference?" Jasmine asked, the skepticism in her voice reflecting her generation's wariness of corporate promises. "I think it could," Darnell replied thoughtfully. "With the right structure and authority, which this appears to have." "Then I think you should do it, Dad," Jordan said. "Use what happened to us to make things better for others." Ava nodded in agreement. "Change happens from both outside and inside systems. We need people in both positions." Darnell composed his acceptance email, emphasizing that his role would be to ensure accountability rather than to provide public relations cover. Richardson's response came quickly, a simple acknowledgement that this was precisely why he had been selected. As the family prepared for bed after an exhausting 2 days, Jasmine raised a question that had been troubling her. "Do you think anything would have changed if Jordan hadn't recorded what happened? If the video hadn't gone viral?" It was the uncomfortable reality at the heart of their experience. The exceptional response they had received was directly tied to the public exposure and potential damage to the airline's reputation. "Probably not in the same way," Darnell acknowledged honestly. "But that's why documentation matters. That's why speaking up matters, even when it's painful or risky. And that's why representation in decision-making positions matters," Ava added. "So that it doesn't take a viral video for people to be treated with dignity." As they settled into their rooms, the family reflected on the transformation their ordeal had initiated, not just in airline policy, but in public conversation about the everyday discrimination that persisted despite laws and corporate policies supposedly designed to prevent it. Their personal humiliation had become a catalyst for potential systemic change. Whether that change would be sustained beyond the current media cycle remained to be seen, but the groundwork had been laid for meaningful reform. For Jordan and Jasmine, the experience had been both traumatic and empowering, a harsh lesson in the realities of racial discrimination, but also in the power of documentation, public accountability, and strategic advocacy. And for Delta Airlines and the broader travel industry, the incident had forced a reckoning with practices that had long gone unchallenged, creating an opportunity for substantive reform if the commitment proved genuine. 6 months later, Darnell Jackson stood at the boarding gate of Delta Flight 1142 from Atlanta to Chicago, his first-class boarding pass in hand. The scene was strikingly familiar, the same airport, the same airline, a similar business trip, yet the experience could not have been more different. "Good morning, Mr. Jackson," the gate agent greeted him with a genuine smile. "Thank you for your loyalty. We're ready to begin boarding whenever you're ready." As he moved toward the jet bridge, Darnell reflected on the extraordinary changes that had unfolded since that fateful day 6 months earlier. What had begun as a humiliating incident of discrimination had catalyzed transformation far beyond what he could have imagined. The most immediate change had been in his own professional life. While maintaining his executive position, Darnell now served as the chairman of Delta's Executive Diversity Advisory Board, a role with substantial authority and influence. Under his leadership, the board had implemented comprehensive reforms in hiring practices, training protocols, and customer service policies. But perhaps more significantly, these changes had spread beyond Delta to influence industry standards. The Jackson Protocols, as they had become known in the airline industry, established clear guidelines for avoiding discriminatory treatment of passengers and were now being adopted by carriers worldwide. Darnell's phone buzzed with a text message from Ava. Jordan just got the letter from MIT. Full scholarship. He smiled at the news. Their son's renewable energy project, which had earned honorable mention at the national competition, had caught the attention of university recruiters. The scholarship was a testament to Jordan's brilliance and perseverance, though Darnell couldn't help but wonder if the visibility from their viral experience had played a role as well. As he settled into his first-class seat, Darnell noticed another black family being welcomed aboard with the same respect and courtesy extended to other premium passengers. No questioning of their tickets. No suspicious glances. No suggestions that they didn't belong. The flight attendant, wearing a small pin that read, Inclusion Ambassador, part of the new training program Darnell had helped develop, offered him a pre-departure beverage. "Mr. Jackson, it's an honor to have you on board," she said. "I completed your training program last month. It's changed how I approach my work with every passenger." The training program she referenced had been developed in collaboration with civil rights organizations and diversity experts. Unlike previous corporate diversity initiatives that often amounted to little more than checkbox exercises, this program included practical scenarios, accountability measures, and ongoing evaluation. Midway through the flight, Darnell received an email from Calvin Richardson, who had remained CEO of Delta and had become both a professional ally and personal friend. The message contained the quarterly diversity metrics that were now publicly reported as part of the airline's transparency commitment. The numbers showed measurable improvement. Complaints of discriminatory treatment had decreased by 78% across the airline. Employee diversity at all levels had increased. Customer satisfaction scores among minority passengers had risen significantly. "None of this would have happened without your family's courage," Richardson had written at the bottom of the report. "Sometimes it takes one incident to spark lasting change." As Darnell reviewed the data, he thought about his daughter Jasmine, who had been so deeply affected by their experience. In the months following the incident, she had channeled her pain into purpose, writing a powerful essay about the experience for her school newspaper. That essay had been picked up by major publications and eventually expanded into a feature article for The Atlantic titled, "Flying While Black." The piece had resonated with readers across the country, prompting thousands of similar stories and adding momentum to the movement for change in the travel industry. Jasmine, once hesitant to draw attention to herself, had discovered her voice as an advocate. She now led a student organization focused on documenting and addressing everyday discrimination, equipping her peers with strategies for effective advocacy. Jordan, meanwhile, had expanded his science project in an unexpected direction. Inspired by their experience, he had begun researching how algorithmic bias in customer service systems could perpetuate discrimination. His work had attracted attention from tech companies interested in addressing these hidden forms of bias in their systems. The family's experience had transformed them individually and collectively. What could have remained a painful memory of injustice had instead become a catalyst for their growth as advocates and changemakers. As Darnell's flight began its descent into Chicago, he received another text, this time from Thomas Anderson, the white businessman who had stood up for them that day at the gate. Over the months, Anderson had become a friend and ally in diversity work, using his position as a frequent business traveler to document and challenge discriminatory practices when he witnessed them. "Just boarded my flight to Dallas," Anderson's message read. "Noticed the new training materials in the flight attendant's hands. Your influence is everywhere these days. Let's catch up next week." Anderson represented another dimension of the transformation, the awakening of bystanders to their responsibility in creating more equitable environments. He had gone from being one rare voice willing to speak up to helping build networks of allies committed to interrupting discrimination when they witnessed it. After landing in Chicago, Darnell headed to his hotel, where he was scheduled to deliver a keynote address at a transportation industry conference the following day. His speech, titled From Incident to Impact, Transforming Corporate Culture, would share the lessons learned from their family's experience and the subsequent reforms. In his hotel room that evening, Darnell video called Ava and the twins to share the good news about the diversity metrics and to check in on their day. "You know what I realized today?" Jasmine said during their call. "6 months ago, we were thrown out of first class because they didn't think we belonged there. Now Dad is literally writing the rules for how airlines treat their passengers." Her observation captured the remarkable arc of their journey, from victims of discrimination to architects of systemic change. "I saw another black family in first class today," Darnell told them. "The difference in how they were treated was night and day compared to our experience." "That's what matters," Ava replied. "Not the apologies or the compensation, but the real changes that affect real people." As they ended their call, Darnell put the finishing touches on his keynote speech for the next day. In his conclusion, he had written, "The true measure of progress isn't found in corporate statements or diversity reports, though those have their place. It's found in the everyday experiences of people who no longer have to face the humiliation and barriers that my family encountered. It's found in the child who doesn't have to ask their parent, 'Why are they treating us differently?' It's found in the employee who feels empowered to do what's right rather than what's expected. And it's found in the recognition that creating equitable spaces benefits everyone, not just those who have been historically excluded." The transformation sparked by their painful experience had rippled outward, touching countless lives in ways they would never fully know. From airline protocols to public discourse, from corporate accountability to individual allyship, the impact continued to expand. For the Jackson family, the journey had been both painful and empowering. They had experienced the worst of American racism and the best of American reform. They had been reminded of how far society still needed to go while helping to move it forward. As Darnell prepared for sleep, he thought about how differently things might have unfolded without Jordan's quick thinking to record the incident, without the viral spread of that recording, without Richardson's unusually forthright response. It was a reminder of both how exceptional their resolution had been and how much work remained to make such accountability the norm rather than the exception. The transformation was real and meaningful, but it had required extraordinary circumstances to occur. The true test would be whether such changes could be sustained and expanded until they became the unremarkable standard rather than the noteworthy exception. The Jackson family's story teaches us that racial discrimination persists even for successful, educated Black Americans. Their experience highlights how recording evidence can transform individual trauma into systemic change. While viral attention shouldn't be necessary for justice, documentation creates accountability that's otherwise easily denied. The story demonstrates the power of speaking up, from Jordan recording the incident to Thomas standing as an ally. It shows how corporate leaders like Richardson can choose accountability over denial when confronted with clear evidence of discrimination. Most importantly, this story reveals how meaningful change requires action at multiple levels: individual courage, corporate accountability, public pressure, and sustained commitment to reform. The transformation wasn't just in airline policies but in how each family member channeled their pain into purpose, Darnell through corporate leadership, Jasmine through writing, and Jordan through research. Their journey reminds us that justice often requires both documentation and determination, and that today's painful experiences can become tomorrow's catalyst for change. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced while traveling? Would you have the courage to record and share it like Jordan did? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can all help create more equitable spaces. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful racism stories that need to be told. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the reality of racism in everyday spaces. Your support helps us continue bringing these crucial racism stories to light and pushing for real change. Thank you for joining our community of viewers committed to facing uncomfortable truths. Remember, sometimes the most powerful racism stories are the ones that end with transformation. Until next time, keep standing up for justice wherever you go.